Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, the social conservatives once again get the shaft. Also, the V team takes a look at the takeaways from the 2015 session. And Speaker Mike Hubbard and Senator Dale Marsh are at odds. Is it because one is staying at the Statehouse and the other is going to the big house? All this and much, much more coming up next on The V.
The Voice of Alabama Politics with your host, Bill Brett, and the V team with Claire Austin, Susan Britt, Jack Campbell, Baron Coleman, Charlana Spencer, and special reports with Jonathan BARBEE. Now, the #1 political show in Alabama, The V.
Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by the V team. Welcome all.
Hi.
How's everybody doing?
Good, good.
The session is officially over.
Thank God.
The doomsday budget has been passed and rejected. There seems to be faction upon faction. Susan, what's the hopes for this special session?
That they can get a budget passed. With the factions going the way they are right now, I'm not sure that they can come to any kind of consensus. With the House closing the journal early on the Senate, and the Senate sine-dieting early on the House, so that when the governor sent the budget back after he vetoed it, they couldn't do anything with it. Hopefully, from now to August, they'll take enough time to try to kind of put the knives down a little bit and see if we can actually get to some sort of reasonable budget.
I mean, Baron, you know, you're out there every day looking at this stuff like we are. You and Jack do this every day. I mean, are you hearing that there's any common ground at this point?
No, I'm not hearing there's any common ground. If anything, it's getting worse by the day. People are becoming more entrenched in their positions. The people who are against gambling are now, threatening to leave the party and take the ball and go home. People that are against tax raises are going back home and telling the people, see, I didn't raise taxes when they were pressuring me to. I mean, people are becoming more entrenched, not less. I'm not sure waiting till August is the best idea. It seems to be what they're going to try to do. Usually that tells me they're going to try some backroom deals and try to twist some arms. But I think the longer they wait, the worse off it's going to be.
Jack, do you think there's any leadership to bring this together?
Doesn't look like it so far. And I think the longer it goes before the special session, that doesn't bode well for Mike Hubbard, I don't think, because there's a lot of dissension in the House.
Yeah, that's one of the things we're hearing is that people are blaming Mike Hubbard.
And Bentley has really dug his heels in on this tax deal. And now they're saying he's not going to put gaming in the call. I don't know what that does, because clearly we polled it, Baron did, and I did, and people are overwhelmingly for it.
Well, they certainly are not for taxes.
No.
I've talked to several senators who said that they want to put everything on the table. Paul Busman, I spoke with him, Senator Busman from Coleman. He said, unless we get serious and put everything, and I mean everything, on the table, we're never going to come up with a solution. We're hearing rumors that they want to take the governor wants to give them the use tax and just be done with it. I mean, how does that work out, Baron?
Basically, it's what they've been threatening to do this whole time. It's completely robbing education to pay for the deficit on Medicaids and prisons. And I don't know how many people are going to be able to campaign on that I stole money out of the education trust fund that you, the voters, put there for a reason, so we couldn't touch it. I stole that money and invested it into Alabama's prison system. That doesn't play well in election time.
This never would have been even an issue if Henry Mabry was still at the AEA. The AEA has abdicated all responsibility over education, as far as I can see. Do you see any pushback? I mean, they're getting ready to rob. They're at least suggesting that they robbed the education trust fund.
They can't pay back. We can't pay back the loans we've got already. We skipped payments this year. If they go into the education trust fund, they're just going to bankrupt it. But I tell you, I know that one of the reasons Governor Bentley wants to go for the use tax is because he's afraid that his popularity is slipping. Take gaming out of the call, see how fast your popularity goes down from there.
Well, nobody comes into office, Jack, and you know this, and leaves as popular as they came in. I mean, it's
not usually. You know, a lot of, well, if you look at presidents, they went out on a low ebb, and I think it's true with Governor Riley. I think he was high in everybody's, you know, approval rating until he started raiding bingo parlors and you know. But I think you're right. Most of the time, incumbents go out not as popular as they went in.
Well, you know, and I don't want to beat up on the governor. I think the governor is a nice man. I think the people respect him and love him. You know, we did an article this week where we went back and looked at where candidate for governor Bentley said that he was opposed to gaming, but he wanted to let the people vote. And then in 2013, there was an interview with the Montgomery Advertiser where he once again said he was against gaming, but wanted to let the people vote. He even said that if a compact came before him, he would want it to be something that the people would vote on. He doesn't seem to want to let the people vote now, Susan.
I think he never expected it to really come up. I think he never expected for both houses to come with a gaming bill. Because every time we've ever talked to him about it, he would say, well, you know, the legislation's got to start in the legislature, and I have no control over that.
Is this a sincere argument, Barron?
No, it's not. People need to be judged by their words. One of the reasons people lose popularity over the course of being in office is you have to burn up a little political capital to get what you want. You also are judged in the whole context of your 8 years in office. And people are looking back now and saying, hey, wait a minute. What he was saying in 2010, what he was saying in 2013, was that true? And it's costing him some political capital. He needs to, if he's serious about retaining his legacy, going out on top as a good governor, he needs to include the gambling in the call. Just say, you guys, everything's on the table. Anything that could possibly produce revenue is on the table. Now go fix the budget. If he does that, I think his popularity may edge back up.
Well, I'm with Busman on that. You just got to put everything on the table. I'm not a pro gambling because it's a zero-sum game, but I am pro letting the people decide. We live in a country founded on letting people decide. Right, Jack?
That's right. And I think he'll make a big mistake if he doesn't put it in the call, because what our polling data reflects, as well as the fact that he set out initially saying, I don't have a problem with allowing the people to vote. And when you don't give them that right, when, you know, it's been floated out there, people are going to be very upset.
Well, I agree. I think, you know, do what you say you're going to do. Let them vote. One of the things, Barron, and I know you and I have talked about this, is these social conservative ideas, pro-life bills, pro-firearm bills, repealing Common Core. We got about 1 minute, but not a darn one of those was allowed to pass this year. They do this time and again. They just kick social conservatives in the teeth.
They do. I mean, I promise you, as 2018 gets closer, they'll trot a couple of these bills out and they'll pass them so that they can run and say, look, I tightened up pro-life legislation. I gave you more rights to your guns. But right now, we're a little too far away to actually do it. It makes you question whether they actually care about any of these issues, or whether they're just using it to slap voters in the face around election time and say, see, look what I did.
It's hypocritical, isn't it, Susan?
It is. And a lot of, like the Rainy Day Patriots, Ann Eubanks is coming out and saying, you know, we've played them nice long enough. This is it. You know, we're taking the gloves off now. And John Rice is calling them out as well, saying this is pretty much like a bad date.
Well, I mean, you know, for 5 years now, they pandered to them, and then, like you said, at the very end, they give them a little something and just keep them coming back to the trough.
Right.
I don't know. It's just disappointing.
They're like drug dealers.
You're right. We're going to have to hold it right there. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back after the station break.
Drug
Want some water, man?
What?
Drug dealers.
That's true.
That just hit me. It just hit me.
It is. They give you a little taste.
The V is sponsored by Spot On Strategies Group.
Sadly, this happens too often in families with autistic children.
First nightmare, their child wanders off, disappears, and is nowhere to be found.
Where her body was found just a couple hours ago.
An autistic boy wanders away from home and dies.
Welcome back to The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We're joined by Claire Austin.
Good morning. Good to be with y'all.
Good to see you, Claire. How was your birthday?
It was divine.
Remember it?
Yes, of course.
Claire,
I got 29 more days to celebrate.
29 more days?
Yeah, I'll celebrate for a full month.
Oh.
Well, I tell you, you look splendid in your springy, summery outfit.
Thank you. This is my clothing line that I rep in Alabama, Worth Clothing, worthnewyork.com. Thank you.
There you go.
We don't charge for those plugs.
I figured if I have to sell it, I might as well wear it and promote it.
There you go. Looks great.
Thanks.
What didn't look great was the aftermath of the 2015 legislative session. What are some of the takeaways from that, Barron? I mean, give us your thoughts.
Well, overall, you have to look at it as a colossal failure. They have one constitutional obligation. We pay them $6 or $8 million a year to come down here and pass a budget. They spent 29 legislative days. They signed a day early and didn't pass a budget. So it's obviously a failure. They were able to get some of their key items that they wanted to get passed. They wanted to get charter schools passed. They finally, after years of trying, finally got it passed. So there were some things they were able to get accomplished. Some of the big, failures were things like pro-life legislation, pro-gun legislation. The most shameful thing I've seen in a long time, Gerald Allen's bill, Senate Bill 14, passed out of the Senate, went to the House, and Mike Hubbard wouldn't even assign it to a committee.
Now, that was the bill that allowed you to carry in your car without a concealed carry.
It basically extended your home to your automobile, which many court cases have upheld, and allows you to carry a gun without a permit in your car. And that the fact that Mike Hubbard wouldn't even assign it to a committee is just an absolute disgrace.
Well, some of that's because the Business Council of Alabama is against that, and if whatever the Business Council of Alabama wants, Mike Hubbard's going to tote the water for them.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one of, I was talking to Senator Busman recently, did an interview with him, and I know you know Senator Busman well. He stood up on the floor of the Senate and said, look, we've traded in the AEA for the BCA.
That's right.
Not getting any better.
Well, I mean, it's really appalling, the arrogance of some of the people that lobby for the BCA and how they go and dress these senators down. I mean, I've never seen this in my life. And there was a lot of that took place this session, and it was pretty deplorable. But
well, and they got their the BCA got their hat handed to them on a few bills. Some of these senators, especially these medical guys, they kicked back at them.
Well, the BCA cannot dominate the Senate like they run the House. I mean, Mike's going to do whatever they want. I think they've gotten a crystal clear picture after this session. They do not control the Alabama Senate, and thank goodness they don't.
Yeah.
And I think the cozy relationship that Senator Del Marsh and Mike Hubbard had is not so cozy anymore. They seem to be definitely at odds.
Well, I think, Senator Marsh is trying to do the right thing. He knows that they need to handle the people's business, and he's trying to show some leadership as he can pull it together with different factions and different groups. And Mike, the Speaker, can't stay focused because he's got too many other issues, swirling around him with all these indictments going on. I mean, it's just been, the House has kind of been in chaos most of the session.
Well, and that's some of the things that the senators were saying. He said, look, we can't get, we can't get anything done because the House is not getting anything done, but the House is also blaming the Senate. I mean, there's a lot of blame going around, that's for sure.
As long as some of us have been around this process, it's always, you can pretty much pass anything in the House. It's hard to pass something in the Senate. And just like the gun bill you mentioned, for it to pass in the Senate and not to pass in the House is highly unusual for something like that to happen.
Well, I don't think Gerald Allen is going to give up on this bill. I think he's a little hot about that. And so the Bama carry guys, they really were pushing for that bill. Makes sense to me. One of the things that we did see that was working is this rural caucus, this House Rural Caucus. It's about 40 members. I think majority of them are Republicans, but there's also
a fair
amount of Democrats. That it's basically a ratio that equals the
a lot of makeup of the whole, really makeup of the state. It really is. It's quite diverse as well.
I tell you, I met with them, and it was impressive. It was a very impressive group. Jack, you know some of these guys like David Standridge and Johnny McMorrow.
Yeah, and I think they have a lot of common interests that they are working to achieve, and I think as far as I've known, they've always gotten along pretty well, and it's a good mix of Democrats and Republicans. You're right, and too bad it doesn't transfer to other parts of the House and Senate.
Well, it's been interesting because I've seen a growing trend of that caucus and a lot of people that have issues they want to get before that caucus, and you've seen a lot of leadership kind of emerge from that caucus. And I went and hosted one time this session. It was it was pretty overwhelming, the number of members, and even some that are, like, say, out not in the city of Huntsville or in the city of Birmingham, the outlying areas, they kind of they consider themselves rural, and they all, you know, joined this caucus as well.
Well, one of the things all the members said is that they would back each other up. They didn't always agree, but they agreed on the key points of they didn't always agree on how to get there, but they would agree to set it aside, discuss it, and get to know the issues. I mean, that's been your experience as well?
I love the House Rural Caucus. I think it's outstanding the way they work together. It is a gentleman's club. There are women, obviously, but it's a very informal, very polite. They treat each other with respect and dignity. And I think that you may see some of the next leaders, you know, presumably Mike Hubbard won't be there next year. I think you'll see some of the leadership in the House rise out of that rural caucus. I do.
Well, it was really refreshing. I met with the leadership and I talked with a bunch of the members, and it was refreshing to see these people have the big picture. They get it. They see it. They don't all agree on how to get there, but they agree to work with each other to get there. Yeah. I think it's a model for how the rest of it could happen. Yeah, I think it's really an exceptional program. One of the things that's been on the front page last couple of weeks is this renaming of the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And the bridge known primarily for Bloody Sunday. It's named, from what we understand, after a man who was a diehard racist. You have a respectable senator, Hank Sanders, who wants to change it. Then you have a respected representative from the U.S. Congress, Terry Sewell, that doesn't want it changed. Claire, how does this boil down?
Well, once again, you've got a very strong, devout senator who's been in office for many, many years, very well respected in the Black Belt, and then you have a female congresswoman. Of course, she's in a congressional office. So at the end of the day, I'm not really sure who. I guess at the end of the day, I think that Senator Sanders may come out on the top of this.
It's an interesting thing to try to change a historical name like that.
I would be stunned if Hank Sanders comes out on top, and for this reason. You have 50 years of history locked up on this bridge. How many pictures, I mean, in the Statehouse, in archives and history, just in all kinds of historical books, do you see the Edmund Pettus Bridge with the words Edmund Pettus
You're right,
Bridge
you're
on
correct.
And to change it to something silly like Journey to Freedom or whatever he wants to call it, you know, there's a beautiful irony. The fact that they marched over a bridge named for a noted white supremacist. There's a beautiful irony in that. And the fact that they were able to overcome that. I mean, to me, there's so much symbolism there. Now, if the bridge gets rusty and needs to be torn down and replaced, then rename it. But as long as the bridge is there, to me, it needs to be the Edmund Pettus Bridge.
Well, that's going to be the last word on that. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back.
Sadly, this happens too often in families with autistic children.
Worst nightmare, their child wanders off, disappears, and is nowhere to be found.
Where her body was found just a couple hours ago.
An autistic boy wanders away from home and dies.
Welcome back to The V, the voice of Alabama politics. I know we all hear this same question at least once a week. If we're around politicos, once an hour. And people come to us all the time, Jack, and say, do you really believe Mike Hubbard will ever be convicted by Lee County jury?
That's the $64,000 question. But 18 people thought he was guilty of 23 felonies. And if that's the case, I don't know that you can predict it, but I just don't know how he escapes this.
Well, I mean, that is the question we get all the time, Claire.
Yeah, I know. And a lot of people are very hesitant and think that he may walk scot-free. I hope that justice prevails. But as you sit back and reflect a little bit, when you go through the black and white emails, the average person, I don't care what education level you are at in the state of Alabama, they understand a black and white email. They're going to believe that. And out of 23 counts, only one got a stick.
Yeah, it only takes one.
It only takes one out of 23. And you know, and I guess, and you may have as well, Barron, but I've talked to a lot of lawyers and judges, and their names remain anonymous, but they tell me that there's 3 counts they don't think there's any way in this world he can get out of.
Yeah.
So,
I think, you know, that's what we hear. And I just tell people, look, like you said, it only takes one.
That's right.
And there are a couple of them, like the APCI, they're just so damning. And those emails, like you mentioned, they just open up his soul on this thing. I mean, Barron, you really taken them apart.
And as Jack said, you had 18 members drawn at random from Lee County sitting on a grand jury, his peers. It wasn't Matt Hart, it wasn't Van Davis, it wasn't Luther Strange. These are peers of his. Sat down, looked at the evidence that was presented to them, and said it was more likely than not he was guilty of these things. That it needed to go to a jury to determine guilt or innocence. Now, that doesn't mean he's guilty. Doesn't mean he'll be found guilty, but it tells you something. It tells you that there's something there that needs to be looked at and more closely examined.
And the APCI deal, I mean, it cost Greg Wren his job in the legislature.
Well, and that's the thing that's getting left out of this. Greg Wren got a deal for a reason.
Right.
And Greg Wren's sitting on the sidelines now, not practicing insurance, not in the legislature. He's sitting back on the sidelines, and he got a ticket out of this thing.
Yeah.
And the ticket out of it included him testifying.
And you know, they made this argument, you know, Mike was chair of the party while he served in the legislature, and he has a printing company in Lee County. He steered business there.
Absolutely.
For the candidates who he gave money to in 2010. And then they want to argue, oh, well, he only made $9,000. It doesn't matter if he made 1 penny. He still used his office, and that is considered a public office, for personal financial gain.
Well, at one point he was bringing down.
Oh, by the way, you know, that building is for sale if anybody wants to buy it over in Lee County.
Well, that's a different building.
No, it's a different building.
I drove past it Monday when I was dropping my child off
That's a
for
different
camp.
building.
I thought it was crazy. You know, I mean, again, it's not whether you make a dime or $50 million. But at one point, he had contracts that were paying him $40,000 a month. I mean, minimum
that we know of.
Some of them, I think, I've heard a number as high as $70,000 a month. Can you imagine?
I can't, and I've just never seen it where, I mean, I'm a contract lobbyist in the state of Alabama. I would have never dreamt of going to the speaker and giving him a monthly retainer of my client's money, or getting my client to give him a monthly retainer. And that's been going on for the last 4 or 5 years.
And go back to the emails.
I mean, it's egregious, okay?
Yeah.
There's no question about it.
Go back to the emails. And my guess is they didn't put everything out there already. But go back to those emails. You cannot read those emails and walk away and think he's innocent.
Absolutely.
Right. Period. I mean, I just don't see how that's the case. Now, does it rise to reasonable doubt? Let a jury figure that out. You can't walk away and say he's got clean hands in this thing.
Well, I think you go back to some of these other trials. They had Siegelman on a bunch of things. He only got convicted on a couple. I mean, when after the governor, they had a I can't remember his name now. He's been
Don Siegelman.
Not Don Siegelman.
Hunt. Guy Hunt.
Oh, yeah, Guy Hunt.
Guy Hunt. They had a bunch of charges on Guy Hunt. They just got him on a couple. It doesn't have to be all 23. They're all felonies. If you are convicted of a felony, you're out of the legislature. If he's out of the legislature, he has no power.
Well, do you think people came to him and said, oh, Mr. Speaker, we want to pay you $12,000 a month to help us recruit business, or help us consult with us. Economic development. I mean, come on. He solicited. I feel very confident that he solicited. And in fact, in some of those emails, wasn't he asking people to invest in Craftmaster?
In black and white.
Right.
And he was asking people to help his businesses. He was asking lobbyists for something of value, which is illegal.
Well, and the thing is, he whines about it because he was the guy who was the architect. I mean, he says, I was the architect of building this pro-business house, and now they won't pay me. What?
Yeah.
And Will Brooks'
There's
response
no interest like self-interest.
Will Brooks' response was priceless. He's like, I don't think you get it, Mr. Speaker. He tried to dance around it very politely.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
A very, very power-hungry, very greedy man. That's what you got.
I was thinking about Bob Riley's statement before. I don't think much of Bob Riley, and he doesn't think much of me. But I was thinking about the fact that Riley said to him, he said, well, you can be governor or you can be rich, but you can't be both. But Mike thought we could have them both, didn't he, Jack?
Yeah, and I'm not sure that Bob Riley really believes that because he was both governor and rich.
Well, we haven't been able to prove he did anything illegal.
You know, Mike's kids are not of age yet to get out into the business world and start making money.
Yeah. Well, and that's always the terrible thing, you know, is the kids, but they didn't do anything. But Daddy, it's like that song, you know, Daddy had to hire the lawyers, and, you know, it's just terrible for the kids. But
well, it destroyed the legislative session.
Yeah.
I mean, it did, because Hubbard and Marsh now hate each other.
Yeah.
I mean, at least it seems that way from all outward appearances.
Well, when you find that your BFF is a CROOK.
You're not really too interested in going to jail with your best friend if he's a crook.
And the other thing is, assume Del Marsh is innocent, which I'm starting to think that Del Marsh may have had nothing to do with any of this. How much money do some of these people have to pay out in lawyers that were surrounding him? Yeah. Surrounding Mike Hubbard. His little circle of friends has paid out millions in legal fees because of Mike's greed.
You know, and I accused Senator Marsh of doing maybe crooked things and all that, and I apologize for it. But I will say this, he signed those checks that went to Mike's business when he was the finance director. Now, there's nothing illegal there, but boy, to miss that and him being as good a businessman as he is, that's kind of hard to believe.
Yeah, it is.
Well, I think, you know, there again, like so many of these people, I think that Mike had this control and power over everybody, even Senator Marsh at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the chairman, he was the speaker, and nobody was really willing at that time to stand up to him. Now, things have changed, thank the Lord. But it wasn't that way then.
Yeah, he's like the con man. You know, he's picking your pockets while you're sitting there under the spell of this dude. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But nothing new, is it, Barron?
No, it's nothing new. I mean, the people that have worked around Mike for the last 15 or 20 years, they're not shocked by this.
Well, let's just hope that there are better days ahead for the Alabama legislature and better leadership ahead in the state of Alabama for the state house.
And that there's
for the
enough
house.
time before the special session to get a group together to maybe make a change in the House.
Well, if they can make a change in the House, it'll make a change in the state. We're going to have to leave it right there. You've been watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. You can catch fresh stories every day on alreporter.com. Catch us on YouTube and on television stations throughout the state. Thank you for watching.